The dust from Martha Dawson's skirts had barely settled on the boardwalk when she heard the crack of knuckles behind her and knew her life in Kingston, Nevada, had just taken a turn she could not have predicted. It was August of 1882, and the heat pressed down on the mining town like an iron skillet, making tempers short and patience even shorter, which was precisely why she had finally told her boss at the Kingston Mercantile exactly what she thought of his treatment of the Chinese workers who hauled supplies for half the wage of white men. "You are done here," Howard Pritchard had snarled, his face purple as a bruised plum. "No woman talks to me like that in my own establishment. Get out before I have the sheriff throw you out." Martha had not cried. She had walked out with her head high, even though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had worked at that mercantile for 2 years, ever since her father died in a mine collapse and left her alone at 22 years old with nothing but a rented room above the seamstress shop and pride that would not let her beg. The wages had been meager, but they had kept her fed and housed. Now she had nothing. She stood on the boardwalk, the afternoon sun beating mercilessly on her dark hair, and tried to think what to do next. The few respectable jobs available to women in Kingston were already filled. She could sew, but Mrs. Chen already had 2 girls working for her. She could cook, but the hotel had a full staff. The saloons were always hiring, but Martha would rather starve than work in one of those establishments where women were treated like property. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and unhurried, with the slow drawl of someone who had spent years under open skies. Martha turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood a full head taller than her, with shoulders broad enough to block the sun. He wore a dusty brown hat pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water in spring, clear and steady. His face was weathered but handsome, with the kind of strong jaw that belonged on the heroes in the dime novels she sometimes read. A star-shaped scar marked his left cheekbone. "I could not help but overhear what happened in there," he said, gesturing toward the mercantile with a gloved hand. "Good. He was a fool. Work for me instead." Martha blinked, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "Pritchard," the cowboy said, his mouth quirking slightly. "He is a fool, and he always has been. Any man who fires someone for speaking the truth is not worth working for. I am Bennett Jackson. I run a horse ranch about 5 miles north of here. I need someone who can manage my books and handle correspondence with buyers. The pay is $30 a month, room and board included." $30. Martha had been making 15 at the mercantile, and she had to pay for her own room and meals out of that. She studied the man more carefully, looking for signs of deceit or inappropriate intentions, but his gaze remained steady and respectful. He kept a proper distance, and his hands hung relaxed at his sides. "Why would you offer me a job when you do not even know me?" she asked, because Martha Dawson had learned long ago that things which seemed too good to be true usually were. "I know you stood up to Pritchard when most people would have kept quiet," Bennett said. "I know you defended people who could not defend themselves. I know you can read and write, because I have seen you helping customers with orders at the mercantile. That tells me you have courage, principles, and education. Those are the qualities I need in someone managing my business affairs." A bead of sweat rolled down Martha's spine beneath her high-necked dress. The practical part of her brain screamed at her to accept immediately, but the cautious part made her ask, "Would I be the only woman on your ranch?" "No. My cook, Rosa, has been with me for 5 years. She is 60 years old and meaner than a rattlesnake when anyone gets out of line, which is why none of my ranch hands would dare behave inappropriately toward any woman under my roof. You would have your own room in the main house, with a lock on the door. You would take your meals with Rosa and me, not with the hands, and if anyone so much as looked at you wrong, they would answer to me." The certainty in his voice made Martha believe him. She had seen plenty of men in Kingston, ranging from the rough miners to the slick gamblers to the respectable businessmen like Pritchard, who hid their cruelty behind pressed suits. Bennett Jackson seemed different. There was an honesty to him that she could not quite explain, something in the direct way he met her eyes and the calm confidence in his posture. "When would you need me to start?" she heard herself ask. "I have my wagon here. I could take you to collect your things and have you at the ranch by dinner time." Martha thought of her small room with its narrow bed and single window, of the few dresses hanging on pegs and the battered trunk that held her mother's quilt and her father's pocket watch. She thought of Pritchard's red face and his casual cruelty, of the Chinese workers who would continue to be exploited because no one else would speak for them. She thought of the long, uncertain road ahead if she turned down this offer. "All right," she said. "I accept your offer, Mr. Jackson." "Bennett," he corrected gently. "We are not formal out at the ranch." Martha nodded, and something shifted in her chest, some tight knot of fear loosening just slightly. She did not know what awaited her at the Jackson Ranch, but it had to be better than Kingston and the narrow, suffocating life she had been living. The wagon ride took them north through the scrubland that surrounded Kingston, past abandoned mining claims and the occasional homestead, clinging stubbornly to the harsh landscape. Bennett handled the horses with easy competence, keeping them to a steady pace that ate up the miles without overtaxing the animals in the heat. He did not push conversation, but when Martha asked about the ranch, he answered readily. "I started with 50 acres and 20 horses 8 years ago," he told her. "Now I have 200 acres and 100 head. We breed working horses mostly, the kind that can handle rough terrain and long days. Ranchers and freight companies are my main customers, though I have sold a few to the Army as well." "That must require a great deal of organization," Martha said, genuinely interested despite the strangeness of her situation. "More than I can manage on my own anymore. I can break a horse and mend a fence and negotiate a fair price, but I am terrible with ledgers. My correspondence with buyers is a mess. I need someone with a good head for details and the ability to keep everything running smoothly while I focus on the horses." The ranch appeared like a mirage as they crested a low rise. It was built around a natural spring that fed a small creek, creating a ribbon of green through the brown landscape. The main house was a low, adobe structure with a covered porch running along the front. Outbuildings included a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Trees, actual living trees, grew around the house where someone had carefully tended them. "It is beautiful," Martha said, and meant it. Bennett smiled, and the expression transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Martha's breath catch. "Wait until you see the horses." Rosa turned out to be a short, round Mexican woman with steel gray hair and sharp black eyes that took Martha's measure in about 3 seconds. She spoke in rapid Spanish to Bennett, who responded in the same language, and then she turned to Martha and switched to accented but perfectly clear English. "You will sleep in the room at the end of the hall. There is a basin for washing and clean linens on the bed. Dinner is at 6 o'clock. Do not be late, or I will feed your portion to the dog." "I do not have a dog," Bennett pointed out mildly. "Then I will get one," Rosa said, and disappeared back into the kitchen. Bennett showed Martha to her room, which was simply furnished but clean and surprisingly spacious. A bed with an iron frame stood against one wall, covered in a faded quilt. A dresser, a washstand, and a small desk with a chair completed the furnishings. The window looked out over the corrals, where horses moved in the golden late afternoon light. "The office is across the hall," Bennett said from the doorway. "I will show you everything tomorrow. For tonight, just settle in and rest. You have had a difficult day." After he left, Martha sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had woken up as a shop girl in Kingston. Now she was sitting in a rancher's house, hired for a job that paid twice what she had been making, in a place that seemed almost too good to be real. She touched the quilt beneath her fingers, feeling the solid reality of it, and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally changing. Dinner was beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread that Rosa baked daily. They ate at a scarred wooden table in the kitchen, just the three of them, and Martha learned that Bennett had come west from Missouri at 17, worked as a ranch hand for 5 years, and saved every penny until he could buy his own land. Rosa had come with him from the last ranch where he had worked, declaring that he would starve without her cooking. "He tried to make biscuits once," Rosa said, shaking her head sadly. "The chickens would not even eat them." "They were not that bad," Bennett protested, but his eyes danced with humor. Martha found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. The sound felt strange and wonderful, like a rusty gate finally swinging open. The next morning, Bennett showed Martha the office, which was really just a corner of the living room with a desk and several overflowing crates of papers. Letters from potential buyers were mixed with bills of sale, breeding records were scattered among supply invoices, and the ledger books were filled with Bennett's sprawling, barely legible handwriting. "I know it is a disaster," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "I kept meaning to organize it, but there is always something that needs doing with the horses or the property, and the paperwork keeps getting pushed aside." Martha rolled up her sleeves. "Show me your current system, such as it is, and then leave me to it." "This will take several days to sort through properly." Bennett looked relieved and grateful in equal measure. "Take all the time you need. If you have questions, I will be in the barn or the corrals. Just send one of the hands to fetch me." For the next week, Martha immersed herself in the chaos of Bennett's business records. She created a filing system, organized correspondence by date and sender, reconciled the ledger books, and made lists of outstanding payments and pending orders. It was meticulous, demanding work, but she found satisfaction in bringing order to the chaos. More than that, she began to understand the scope of Bennett's operation and to appreciate the intelligence behind his business decisions, even if his record-keeping left much to be desired. She also began to learn the rhythms of ranch life. Rosa woke before dawn to start breakfast for the hands. Bennett was usually up even earlier, checking on the horses and planning the day's work. The ranch employed 6 full-time hands, ranging from young Miguel, who was barely 18 and still learning his trade, to grizzled Sam, who had been working horses since before Bennett was born. They were respectful toward Martha, tipping their hats when they passed her and speaking politely on the few occasions when business required them to communicate. In the evenings, after the work was done and dinner was finished, Martha would sometimes sit on the porch and watch Bennett work with the horses. He had infinite patience with them, never raising his voice or using harsh methods. She watched him gentle a skittish 3-year-old mare, spending hours just sitting in the corral with her, letting her grow accustomed to his presence before he ever attempted to put a bridle on her. "He has a gift," Rosa said one evening, coming to stand beside Martha on the porch. "The horses trust him because he never lies to them. He never promises them it will not be hard or frightening, but he shows them that he will be there with them through it. That is why his horses are the best in Nevada." Martha thought about trust and promises, and the steady way Bennett moved through the world, and something warm unfurled in her chest. A month after Martha arrived at the ranch, a buyer came from California to look at purchasing 20 horses for his freight company. His name was Charles Morrison, and he was the kind of man who wore expensive clothes and assessed everything in terms of its value to him. He looked at Martha with surprise when Bennett introduced her as his business manager. "You let a woman handle your accounts," Morrison said, his tone making it clear what he thought of that arrangement. "Miss Dawson handles them better than I ever could," Bennett said calmly. "If you want to discuss terms and arrange payment schedules, you will be speaking with her." Morrison's eyes narrowed, but he was too eager for the horses to protest. Martha led him to the office and spent 2 hours negotiating a contract that was favorable to the ranch while still giving Morrison what he needed. She was firm on price, flexible on delivery timelines, and absolutely clear about the terms of payment. By the end of the meeting, Morrison was looking at her with grudging respect. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Dawson," he said as he signed the contract. "I represent a business that provides superior animals and service," Martha replied evenly. "That quality deserves fair compensation." After Morrison left, Bennett found Martha in the office, reviewing the signed contract. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "That was impressive," he said finally. "You got him to agree to a 10% higher price than I would have asked. He could afford it, and your horses are worth it. Besides, he will make 3 times that back in the first year using them for his freight business." Bennett shook his head slowly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I am very glad Pritchard was fool enough to fire you." The words were light, teasing even, but something in his eyes made Martha's pulse quicken. She looked down at the contract, suddenly flustered. "Yes, well, I am glad you were there to overhear it." "So am I," Bennett said softly, and then he was gone, leaving Martha staring at the empty doorway and wondering why the room suddenly felt warmer. Summer turned to fall, and the brutal heat gave way to cooler days and cold nights. Martha fell into the rhythm of ranch life as naturally as breathing. She managed Bennett's correspondence, kept his books, negotiated with buyers, and even began making suggestions about breeding decisions based on the market trends she observed in their orders. Bennett listened to her ideas and often implemented them, treating her opinions with the same respect he gave to old Sam's advice about horse training. They worked well together, Martha and Bennett. He would come to the office in the evenings after the day's physical labor was done, and they would discuss business over coffee that Rosa brought them. Those conversations gradually expanded beyond just ranch matters. Bennett told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about the dream of open land and freedom that had drawn him west. Martha shared stories of her childhood in Virginia, of the father who had taught her to read and encouraged her education, even though most people thought it was wasted on a girl, of the journey to Nevada after her mother died, chasing rumors of silver and opportunity. "I think we were both looking for something," Bennett said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "A place where we could be ourselves without having to fit into someone else's idea of who we should be. Have you found it?" Martha asked, hugging her shawl closer against the October chill. "Yes," Bennett said, and when she glanced at him, she found him looking at her instead of the horizon. "I think I have." Martha's heart stuttered in her chest. Over the past months, she had tried very hard not to notice the way Bennett's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how his rare laughter made her feel like she had won some kind of prize. She had tried not to think about the gentleness in his strong hands, or the way he treated everyone from Rosa to the youngest ranch hand with the same fundamental respect. She had tried not to notice that she woke up each morning eager for the day ahead, or that her favorite hours were the ones spent in his company. She had tried, but she had failed utterly. "Martha," Bennett said, and his voice was low and careful, like he was approaching a skittish horse. "I need to tell you something, and I will understand if it makes things awkward or if you need to leave. I will even write you a reference and help you find another position, but I cannot keep quiet about it anymore." "What is it?" Martha whispered, afraid to hope and afraid not to. "I am falling in love with you." The words dropped into the night air like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you walk out of that mercantile with your head high, refusing to let Pritchard make you feel small. And every day since, I have fallen a little more. The way you bring order to chaos, the way you stand up for what is right, the way you laugh at Rosa's stories, the way you are not afraid to tell me when you think I am wrong about something. You are smart and brave and kind, and I know I have no right to feel this way about an employee, but I do. I am in love with you, Martha Dawson, and I needed you to know." Martha could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the overwhelming rush of emotion that threatened to sweep her away. "You are not wrong," she managed finally. Bennett's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. "I know it is inappropriate, but no," Martha interrupted, finding her courage. "You are not wrong about having the right to feel this way, because I feel it too. I love you, Bennett Jackson. I think I have loved you since you offered me a job when I had nothing, since you showed me respect when the world told you I did not deserve it, since you proved every single day that you are exactly the man you seem to be. I love you, and I have been terrified to admit it because I did not want to lose this job, this place, this life. I did not want to lose you." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Bennett stood slowly, moved to where Martha sat, and dropped to one knee beside her chair. He took her hand gently, cradling it between both of his calloused palms. "Then do not lose me," he said hoarsely. "Stay with me, not as my employee but as my wife. I know I should court you properly, give you time, do this right. But I am 30 years old, and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Marry me, Martha. Build this life with me. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved for the rest of our days." Tears blurred Martha's vision. "Yes," she said, and then louder, "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Bennett surged to his feet, pulling Martha up with him. And then his arms were around her, and his lips were on hers. And Martha discovered that all those dime novel descriptions of kisses that made the heroine's knees weak were not exaggeration after all. She melted into him, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, his hair, learning the feel of him as his mouth moved over hers with a tenderness that made her ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rosa was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and a satisfied expression on her weathered face. "Finally," she said. "I was beginning to think you were both blind. The wedding will be here at the ranch, yes. I will make the food. And we will need flowers. Miguel's mother grows roses. I will speak to her." Bennett laughed, the sound full of pure joy. "We have not even discussed a date yet, Rosa." 2 weeks, Rosa declared firmly. "That gives me time to prepare properly, but not so long that you do foolish things before the priest arrives." Martha felt her face flush hot, but Bennett just grinned and pulled her closer against his side. 2 weeks sounds perfect." Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and happiness so intense it almost frightened Martha. She wrote to the few acquaintances she had in Kingston, inviting them to the wedding. Bennett rode into town and returned with bolts of fabric for a wedding dress, telling Martha to have Rosa help her make whatever she wanted. The ranch hands built benches in the yard and strung lights between the trees. Miguel's mother brought not only roses but also dahlias and chrysanthemums from her garden, and she and Rosa spent hours deciding on arrangements. The ceremony took place on a perfect November afternoon, crisp and clear, with the kind of light that made everything look sharp-edged and precious. Father Ramirez came from Kingston to perform the service. Rosa cried throughout the entire ceremony, and Sam, tough old Sam who had seen everything in his 60-plus years, had to wipe his eyes more than once. Martha wore a dress of ivory silk with lace at the collar and sleeves, and Bennett wore a new suit that made him look almost unbearably handsome. When Father Ramirez pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed Martha with such tenderness that she heard several of the watching women sigh. Then Rosa was embracing them both, and the hands were shaking Bennett's hand and tipping their hats to Martha, and someone started playing a fiddle, and the celebration began. They danced in the yard as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. Bennett held Martha close as they swayed to the music, and she rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," Martha whispered back. "I was so angry when Pritchard fired me. I thought my life was over. I had no idea it was just beginning." "Our life," Bennett corrected gently. "Everything I have is yours now. The ranch, the horses, my heart, all of it." "And everything I am is yours," Martha said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "Forever." That night, in the room that was now their room, Bennett made love to his wife with the same patience and tenderness he showed to his horses, taking time to learn what made her gasp, what made her sigh, what made her cry out his name. Martha discovered that her body was capable of pleasure she had never imagined, that the connection between them went deeper than just physical sensation. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, both breathless and overwhelmed, Martha understood why the Bible called it becoming one flesh. She felt transformed, remade, like she had been incomplete all her life and had not even known it until Bennett filled the empty spaces. Winter came to the ranch, bringing occasional snow and cold winds that howled around the buildings at night. Martha and Bennett settled into married life with the same ease they had found working together. She still managed the business side of the ranch, but now they were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, planning for the future together, building something that belonged to both of them. In February, Martha realized she had missed her monthly courses twice and that certain smells, particularly Rosa's coffee in the morning, made her feel queasy. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but when the third month passed with no bleeding and her breasts grew tender, she went to Rosa. The older woman took one look at Martha's face and broke into a delighted smile. "You are pregnant. When did you last bleed?" "October, I think, just before the wedding." Rosa did some calculations in her head. "The baby will come in July then. Does Bennett know?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." "You are sure," Rosa said firmly. "I have delivered enough babies to know the signs. Tonight you tell him." Martha waited until after dinner when they were alone in their room. Bennett was pulling off his boots, talking about a promising yearling colt that Sam thought would be good for breeding when Martha interrupted him. "Bennett, I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him look up sharply. "What is wrong? Are you unwell?" "No." "Well, yes, in a way. I feel sick most mornings and I am tired all the time and certain foods make me want to run from the room." Bennett's brow furrowed in concern. "Should I send for the doctor?" "No. The only cure for my condition is time. About 7 months, I believe." She watched as understanding dawned across his face, saw his eyes go wide and his mouth fall open. "You are pregnant. We are going to have a baby," Martha nodded, suddenly nervous. "Is that all right?" "I know we never discussed." Bennett crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "All right, Martha, it is more than all right. It is wonderful, amazing, terrifying. How are you feeling? What do you need?" "Should you be sitting down?" Martha laughed, giddy with relief. "Put me down and I will answer your questions. I think the baby will come in July. I feel sick in the mornings but fine otherwise. And yes, I probably should sit down since you spinning me around is not helping the nausea." Bennett carefully set her on the bed and knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Martha, you have made me the happiest man alive." Tears pricked Martha's eyes. "I did not know if you wanted children right away." "I want everything with you," Bennett said fiercely. "Children, a lifetime, every moment we can have together. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. And now we are going to have a child." His voice cracked on the last word, and Martha saw tears shining in his eyes. She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the scratch of his evening stubble against her palms. "I love you too, so much that I think my heart might burst from it. We are going to be a family, Bennett." "A family," he echoed, and then he was kissing her, tender and desperate and full of promise. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Martha found herself exhausted in a way she had never experienced before. Rosa fussed over her constantly, preparing special foods meant to strengthen both mother and baby, and Bennett treated her like she was made of spun glass. He took over more of the business correspondence to lighten her workload, and insisted she rest every afternoon. "I am pregnant, not dying," Martha protested one day in May when Bennett suggested she should not ride into town for a meeting with a potential buyer. "I know," Bennett said, maddeningly calm. "But you are carrying precious cargo and I will not take any chances. I will handle the meeting. You stay here and rest." Martha wanted to argue, but the truth was she was tired, her back ached, and the baby had been kicking all morning in a way that made concentration difficult. "Fine," she conceded, "but I want a full report when you return, including every detail of the negotiation." "Yes, madam," Bennett said with mock seriousness, and then he kissed her soundly before heading out. Martha watched him ride away, one hand resting on her swollen belly, and marveled at how drastically her life had changed in less than a year. She had gone from a fired shop girl with no prospects to a married woman expecting her first child, co-owner of a thriving horse ranch, and deeply, completely, ridiculously in love. If someone had told her last August that this would be her life, she would have thought they were mad. The baby came on a sweltering July afternoon when the heat shimmered off the land in visible waves. Martha's labor started just after breakfast, subtle contractions that she initially dismissed as the backache that had been plaguing her for days. By noon, there was no denying what was happening. Rosa took charge immediately, sending Miguel to fetch the midwife from Kingston and banishing Bennett from the bedroom despite his protests. "This is women's work," Rosa told him firmly. "You will wait outside like every other father and try not to get in the way." The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Bennett wore a path in the porch boards from his pacing, and even the ranch hands stayed close to the house, waiting for news. Inside, Martha discovered that labor was every bit as painful as she had heard, but Rosa's steady presence and the midwife's calm competence kept her from panicking. She focused on breathing, on the promise of holding her baby when this was over, on the knowledge that Bennett was just outside waiting for her. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Martha felt the overwhelming urge to push. The midwife examined her and nodded in satisfaction. "The baby is ready. With the next contraction, you push as hard as you can." Martha bore down with all her strength, and the world narrowed to effort and pain and Rosa's voice urging her on. She pushed again and again, until suddenly there was a release and a sound that made her heart stop. A baby's cry, indignant and strong, filled the room. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squirming, blood-streaked infant on Martha's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Martha looked down at her son and felt something inside her crack open, a well of love so deep she could have drowned in it. He was red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with a cap of dark hair and tiny fists that waved angrily at the world. "Bennett," she called, her voice hoarse from crying out during the labor. "Bennett, come meet your son." The door burst open and Bennett was there, his face pale and his hands shaking. He approached the bed slowly, as if afraid he might break something, and looked down at the baby in Martha's arms. His expression transformed into something awed and overwhelmed. "We have a son," he said, his voice breaking. "Martha, we have a son." "We do," she agreed, gently taking Bennett's hand and guiding it to rest on the baby's tiny back. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy, going back and forth on various options. But looking at their son, Martha knew there was only one choice. "Daniel," Bennett said softly. "Daniel James Jackson, if that suits you." "Daniel," Martha repeated, testing the name. Their son made a small snuffling sound and she smiled. "Yes, Daniel is perfect." Bennett leaned down to kiss Martha's forehead, then placed a feather-light kiss on Daniel's head. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Daniel was a healthy baby with a strong appetite and lungs that could wake the entire household when he was hungry. Martha spent her nights feeding him and her days trying to keep up with ranch business while also caring for an infant. Bennett helped as much as he could, changing nappies and walking the floor with Daniel when he was fussy. But there were some things only Martha could do. Rosa declared herself Daniel's honorary grandmother and spent hours rocking him and singing Spanish lullabies that made him calm and sleepy. The ranch hands treated the baby with a combination of reverence and terror, as if he might explode if handled incorrectly. Only old Sam seemed comfortable with the infant, having raised 6 children of his own. He would hold Daniel with practiced ease and tell him stories about horses and the land, as if the baby could understand every word. By the time Daniel was 6 months old, Martha had found her rhythm again. She could manage the ranch books with him sleeping in a basket beside her desk, could conduct negotiations while nursing him under a discreet blanket, could do almost everything she had done before with just a little more creativity. Bennett watched her with constant amazement, telling her more than once that she was the strongest person he had ever met. "I am just doing what needs to be done," Martha said, bouncing Daniel on her hip while reviewing a contract. "No," Bennett corrected gently. "You are doing what many people could not. You are raising our son, running the business side of our ranch, and somehow finding time to be a wonderful wife. You are extraordinary, Martha. Never doubt that." Daniel's first birthday arrived with shocking speed, and Rosa insisted on throwing a party. She baked a special cake and invited Miguel's family and several neighbors. Daniel, who had just started taking his first wobbly steps, was delighted by the attention and the cake, which he mostly smeared across his face rather than eating. That night, after the guests had left and Daniel was finally asleep, Martha and Bennett sat on their porch watching the stars. She was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. "You ever think about where you would be if Pritchard had not fired you?" Bennett asked idly, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. Martha considered the question seriously. Sometimes. I probably would still be working at the mercantile, still living in that tiny room, still trying to make sense of a life that felt too small for who I wanted to be. I would not have you. I would not have Daniel. I would not have this ranch and this life and this love. I think about it too, Bennett admitted, about how I almost did not approach you that day. I had seen you at the mercantile before and thought you were beautiful, but I never had the courage to speak to you. Then I heard Pritchard yelling, and I saw you walk out with your head high, and something just made me act. What if I had not? What if I had let you walk away? But you did not, Martha pointed out. You offered me a job and a future, and I was brave enough to accept. We found each other, Bennett. Maybe it was luck or fate or divine intervention, but we found each other and we built this. No matter how it happened, I am grateful for every moment. Bennett turned to kiss her, slow and deep, and Martha felt the familiar heat building between them. It had been difficult to find time for intimacy with an infant in the house, but they had managed stolen moments when Daniel was napping or late nights after he was asleep. She loved the way Bennett still looked at her with desire, even after seeing her body change with pregnancy and childbirth. She loved the way he made her feel beautiful and wanted and cherished. I want more, Bennett murmured against her lips. More of this, Martha teased, kissing him again. More of everything, more nights like this, more children if you want them, more years together, more life with you, Martha. I want every moment we can have. I want that too, Martha whispered. All of it. Everything. Time moved forward, as it always does, bringing changes and challenges and moments of joy. Daniel grew from a baby into a curious toddler who wanted to be wherever his father was, trying to help with the horses, despite being more hindrance than assistance. Bennett was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about the animals with the same gentleness he showed the colts. When Daniel was 2, Martha discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was not also adjusting to marriage and running a business. Their daughter, born in the spring of 1886, had Martha's dark hair and Bennett's clear green eyes. They named her Grace, and she was everything her name implied. A peaceful baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with solemn interest. Daniel was initially uncertain about the baby, but he quickly embraced his role as big brother, bringing her toys and patting her head with surprising gentleness for a 2-year-old. Bennett declared himself outnumbered now, and joked that he needed to have another son to even the odds. Perhaps in a few years, Martha said, laughing. Let me recover from this one first. The ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of Bennett Jackson's horses and the fair dealing of his business manager wife. They expanded their operation, buying another 100 acres and building a second barn. They hired 2 more hands, including a young woman named Alice who wanted to learn horse training. Bennett took her on without hesitation, ignoring the raised eyebrows from some of the more traditional ranchers in the area. If she wants to learn and is willing to work hard, she deserves the chance, he told Martha. Just like you deserved the chance Pritchard was too foolish to give you. In 1888, when Daniel was 5 and Grace was 2, Martha found herself pregnant for the 3rd time. This pregnancy was more difficult than the previous 2, leaving her sick and exhausted through the first few months. Bennett hovered anxiously, and Rosa clucked over her constantly, but Martha pushed through, determined not to let her discomfort interfere with the ranch or her family. Their second son was born in December, smaller than Daniel had been but healthy and strong. They named him Thomas, and he proved to have his father's temperament, calm and patient even as an infant. 3 children, Bennett said one night, watching Martha nurse Thomas while Daniel read a picture book to Grace on the floor. "We have 3 perfect children and a life I never dared dream about. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Martha corrected. "The day I told Pritchard exactly what I thought of him and you were there to hear it." Daniel looked up from his book. "Who is Pritchard?" "A very foolish man," Bennett said firmly. "But we do not need to talk about him. What story are you reading to your sister?" As their children grew, Martha and Bennett made sure to tell them the story of how their parents met, though they edited it somewhat for young ears. The children loved hearing about the day their mother was fired for speaking the truth, and their father rode up like a hero in a story and offered her a job. "You are very brave, Mama," Grace said solemnly when she was 6 years old. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." "You can be anything you want," Martha told her daughter, stroking her dark hair. "Never let anyone tell you that you cannot do something just because you are a girl. You have a voice and a mind, and they are gifts. Use them." Bennett taught all 3 children to ride as soon as they were big enough to sit a horse. He showed them how to approach the animals with respect, how to read their moods, how to earn their trust. Daniel, the eldest, showed a natural aptitude for training and spent hours following his father around the ranch, absorbing everything he could. Grace was fearless, riding faster and taking bigger jumps than her brothers, her laughter ringing across the corrals. Thomas was methodical and careful, preferring to study the horses from a distance before approaching them. But once he made friends with an animal, the bond was unbreakable. The years rolled by, marked by birthdays and holidays, by foals being born and horses being sold, by quiet moments and grand adventures. Martha and Bennett grew older together, weathering droughts and harsh winters, celebrating successes and supporting each other through challenges. The love between them deepened with time, becoming something solid and unshakable, the foundation upon which everything else was built. In 1895, 13 years after Martha walked out of the Kingston Mercantile and into her future, the family gathered on the porch to celebrate Daniel's 13th birthday. He was already nearly as tall as his father, with the same strong shoulders and steady hands. Grace was 10, all flying hair and boundless energy. Thomas was 7, quiet and thoughtful, always watching and learning. Bennett stood behind Martha, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They watched their children playing in the yard, chasing each other around the trees that had grown tall over the years, their laughter floating on the evening air. "You remember when it was just the 2 of us," Bennett murmured, "when this house seemed so big and empty." "I remember," Martha said, leaning back into his embrace. "I remember thinking I had never been so happy and not knowing it was possible to be even happier. And now I know that love is not a finite thing. It grows and expands to fill whatever space you give it. I loved you completely then, and I love you completely now, but the love I feel now encompasses so much more. Our children, our life, everything we have built together. It is all part of the love story that started the day you said Pritchard was a fool." Bennett turned her in his arms so he could look into her face. There were fine lines around her eyes now, threads of silver in her dark hair, but to him she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her. "He was a fool," Bennett said seriously. "One of the greatest fools who ever lived, because he had you working for him and did not appreciate what he had. But his foolishness was my fortune, and I thank God for it every single day." "I love you," Martha said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Bennett replied. "Forever, Martha. Nothing will ever change that." Daniel called out something about unfair advantages in their game, and Grace's indignant response made both parents laugh. They stood together on their porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Martha thought about the path that had led her here. From Virginia to Nevada, from lost to love, from a tiny room above a seamstress shop to a ranch that sprawled across the land, from solitude to a family that filled every corner of her heart. She thought about Howard Pritchard sometimes, wondered if he still ran his mercantile with the same small-minded cruelty, if he had any idea what his actions had set in motion. She hoped he did not. He deserved no credit for the beautiful life she had found. No, this life was the result of her own courage in speaking truth to power, of Bennett's willingness to see her value when others dismissed her, of the love they had built together through hard work and dedication, and absolute faith in each other. This was the life they had earned, the happiness they had created from nothing but hope and determination. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and Rosa called everyone in for birthday cake, Martha took Bennett's hand and squeezed it gently. He squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had said and everything they did not need to say. They were partners, lovers, parents, friends. They were two people who had found each other against the odds and built something that would last long after they were gone. They were a family. And it was more than Martha Dawson had ever dreamed possible on that hot August day in 1882, when she walked out of the Kingston Mercantile with her head held high, not knowing that the best chapter of her life was about to begin with a cowboy's simple offer and a future full of love waiting just around the corner.